Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, What is Life After Coronavirus? Next Steps for ReStart Ohio and Workplace Safety Compliance. Presented by Rea Associates, a top 100 regional CPA and business consulting firm with offices across Ohio. My name is Imani Fields, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items to cover. First, if you have any questions during today's presentation, you may enter them into the chat box on your screen. We will try to answer as many questions as we can at the conclusion of today's presentation. However, to be respectful of your time, we know that we will not be able to get to them all. Therefore, following today's webinar, we will review all questions and send out the answers via email as soon as we can. When you receive this email, you will also receive the recording of today's presentation, as well as a link to participate in a very short evaluation. Please take a few minutes to share your thoughts about the presentation as a whole, the information provided, and our presenter. Your feedback is important to us as we determine future webinar topics related to the current COVID-19 crisis. Also, if you'd like a copy of today's slides, you find that they're available in the handout section of the webinar dashboard on your computer screen. Please note that the resources presented today are for informational purposes only. Rea Associates does not provide legal advice and will not make management decisions for your organization. You are encouraged to consult with legal counsel of your choice prior to implementing any policies or procedures within your organization. Today's webinar will be given by Darlene Finzer and Renee West. A principal and director of later life planning services at Rea Associates, Darlene Finzer has more than 30 years of experience in the accounting industry. Darlene specializes in assisting organizations with legacy family planning, retirement readiness, financial fitness, and fiduciary responsibility. She has also been featured in several publications, including Benefits Pro and Thompson Newsletter. Renee West is a senior manager and leader of Rea Associates HR consulting practice. With more than 27 years of experience in human resources, Renee specializes in assisting organizations within the manufacturing, nonprofit, contingent staffing, food, and other industries with their HR challenges. She is also currently serving on the Ohio Society for Human Resource Management's Board of Directors as Central District Director. Today, Renee and Darlene will hone in on the updated regulations and policies such as the ReStart Ohio initiative, workplace safety, updates from the state and federal government, and more amid our current COVID-19 crisis. And I'm going to pass it on to you, Renee.
Thank you, Imani. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webcast, and we thank you for taking time to visit with us today. Many employers are in the process of planning for employees to re-enter the workplace and also ensure compliance with all the new regulations. Today, we will be providing you with resources to assist with this transition and also be compliant with the new normal. We'll also talk through a few topics to keep on your radar as we move through the next few weeks. Our topics for discussion today will include, next slide, please. ReStart Ohio. We'll talk through the timelines for the respective businesses, review governor updates and regulations. Workplace safety will cover returning to work best practices and protocols. Also talk through OSHA and the recordable cases for COVID. Policy updates for employee handbook. We'll look at new recommendations and updates, and also safety policies your organization should have. Next slide, please. And from a radar topic to have in your mind as we move forward is we'll be covering some information on potential employment lawsuits, expected increase, types of lawsuits, and what can you do as an employer to mitigate your risk for your organization. And Darlene will cover employee wellness, and we'll talk through some employer resources as well. So as you can see, this is a lot of information to move through. We will also be providing web links for you as additional resources for specific content. Next slide, please. As we look through the timeline for restarting Ohio, May 1st, 2020 today, healthcare is opening for medically necessary procedures. Regular doctor visits, well checks, baby visits, outpatient surgeries, and diagnostic tests are also open. And dental services and veterinary services may also proceed, all ensuring that there's a safe environment for their employees. Next slide, please. If we look at the next timeline for openings, May 1st, 2020, which is next Monday, manufacturing, distribution, construction businesses may reopen, ensuring that mandatory safety requirements are followed for customers and employees. At the bottom of this slide, you will see a link to a resource PDF that employers can post at their organizations that review the PPE requirements and an overview of the regulations and safe workplace for these specific industries mentioned. Next slide, please. And we also look at May 4th as an opportunity for general office environments to reopen, again, providing they provide mandated safety requirements for customers and employees. And you'll also see a link here on this page for a downloadable PDF to support those regulations for this industry as well. Next slide, please. And the next timeline for reopening is scheduled for May 12th, which will include consumer retail services, again, providing that they meet mandatory safety requirements. And you'll also see a link here for a downloadable PDF for those organizations as well. Next slide, please. And just also a review at this point, those entities that are continued to be closed, which include schools and daycares, dine-in restaurants, personal appearance and beauty businesses, daycare services for seniors and children, and entertainment, recreation, and gyms. Next slide, please. We do have an update. According to the governor last evening, the Ohio stay-at-home order has been extended through May 29th. It is open for, obviously, those individuals that are working, open for shopping, groceries, etc. So again, that has been extended through to the 29th. Also, the large gatherings of more than 10 people are still prohibited at this time, and we expect continued updates as we move through the next few weeks. So let's talk about, now that we know the timeline of where we are going from a business standpoint, what are some best practices that businesses should have in place as they move through and start to welcome their employees back to the workforce and also have customers and clients coming into their facilities. As we mentioned, there is also a link at the bottom of this page that has another resource for responsible protocols for workplaces to ensure that they follow. And some of those include, obviously, the required face coverings for all employees. Please take time to look at this protocol, as there are some exceptions to those places requiring face coverings if there's a health issue or an underlying safety reason for them not to wear the mask. So please be sure you look at that. Continuing to have daily health assessments or temperature checks for employees, maintaining good hygiene at all times, cleaning and sanitizing workplaces throughout the day. And there is also a notation on limited capacity for meeting social distancing guidelines to establish a maximum capacity at 50% of fire codes. So again, please take time to review that further information in the link. So what are some businesses doing as options to ensure they're compliant with these guidelines? Many organizations are continuing remote work for those individuals that are able to still can do that. And they're also looking at scheduling rotations of shifts of workers to ensure that they're meeting these regulations. So there are a lot of different options to still be able to be compliant, but yet open your workplaces as well. Next slide, please. We've received a lot of questions from clients and are hearing a lot of questions nationwide of, as an employer, what do we do in the event that we have a COVID-19 infection at our workplace? Here are the best practices that the CDC has outlined. Immediately report employee or customer infections to the local health district. Work with local health department to identify potentially exposed individuals to help facilitate appropriate communication. Shut down the shop floor or office for deep sanitation if possible. Professionally clean and sanitize the location, and reopen in consultation with the local health department. Again, please be sure to reach out to your health department in the event that you do have a case. It's important to ensure that you utilize the resources that are out there to help you work through that process. So at this time, we'd like to take a poll question. So poll question number 1. Do you feel your organization is prepared for the return to work? Yes or no? And we'll take a few minutes here to wait for the results to come through.
All right, it looks like 72% said yes and 28% said no.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for taking time to answer that. That's great to see that individuals and companies are ready to open up and welcome back their workers. Let's talk through workplace safety, and we've received a number of questions and are hearing nationwide again. What, as an employer, what do we do if we have a case that someone is saying is COVID related or diagnosed because of their workplace? We've cited the OSHA record keeping requirements that you'll see here on this slide that mandates covered employers record certain work-related injuries and illnesses on their OSHA 300 log. COVID-19 can be a recordable illness if a worker is infected as a result of performing their work-related duties. So that's pretty general. So next slide, please. Let's talk through some, as you're looking through, employers are only responsible for recording cases of COVID-19 if all of the following criteria are met. And again, this is a pretty extensive topic, so we have provided you with individual links to talk through each one of these. The first one being the case is a confirmed case of COVID-19, and the person under investigation and presumptive positive and laboratory confirmed cases of COVID-19. Second criteria is the case is work-related, and again, defined as the regulation that you'll see there. The case involves one or more of general recording criteria set forth, for example, medical treatment beyond first aid, days off from work. And employers should also contact OSHA's Enforcement Guidance Agency for COVID with any questions or determination of whether a case is recordable. This is a great resource to utilize and answer any questions that you might have as you move through this process. As we move through and have made a lot of adjustments to regulations, it's very important that employers take time to look at your employee handbook and your safety policies. Why should you do that? Primarily to ensure that your employee handbook and safety policies are current and updated to reflect the new regulations. Consistent and current policies assist with administration and mitigate risk for employee lawsuits. It also provides your employees with resources regarding company information and expectations, especially as we move forward with new safety policies and new PPE requirements. It's a great resource to be able to ensure consistency in what you're speaking to. It also provides an employee signature acknowledgement form to ensure that all employees are updated in reference to policies. And we've indicated on here, in quotes, Exhibit A, which I've heard from a number of attorneys over the years of, what does your handbook state is usually the first question if any type of lawsuit comes up. And Exhibit A is usually utilized as your employee handbook. It's one of the first things that they'll look at for any potential discrimination issues, etc. Next slide, please. So let's talk through what should some of those policies be. And that includes the new FFCRA requirements for emergency family leave and emergency paid leave. And keep in mind, these leave regulations go through December of 2020. Also, the existing family medical leave that has been in existence for a number of years. How do these two types of leaves work together? Another policy is the pandemic and emergency preparedness. Obviously, we've all gone through the pandemic at this point, and having a plan in place for any future or additional emergencies is another best practice to have. Also looking at your attendance policy to ensure that that is consistent. Looking at your paid time off policy and how that definition of utilizing paid time off is in conjunction with any employee leave. Next slide, please. Policies should also include the following. These are under the Department of Labor and the FLSA, dealing with payroll and defining how and when an individual's time is kept. What is the process? Are they clocking in? Are they writing their time down, etc.? Defining what the work week schedule is, also defining the timeline for payroll and the dates of payroll. Also looking and defining what your work hours are from a schedule and what your breaks and lunch periods are as well. Another big piece from an employment perspective is looking at employment classifications and the policies and the definitions of hourly, salary, and salary exempt roles. Another updated one should be staffing reductions and recall process. As we've unfortunately seen a number of employers that have needed to reduce staffing and layoffs, what is the process to when you start to recall employees? Having a consistent policy also, again, helps with mitigating that risk. Confidentiality of employee and employer information. So this is twofold. Policies should speak to how employers are keeping employee information confidential. In personnel files or medical files, where are they filed? How are they accessed? Keeping in mind that a number of companies are having discussions with employees now, possibly that they've never had before, of not being able to come into work because of a health-related reason or high risk due to the COVID-19 as well. So ensuring that documentation is kept confidential, that this information is not accessible to other employees. Looking at the employer information, how can companies ensure with additional individuals now working remotely, what is your policy to ensure that your company's information is kept confidential as well? And also the remote work and technology policies. Now that, again, a number of companies are working remotely, it's important to have a policy and procedure in place, and same for the technology as well. Next slide. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, if we could back up one more, Becca. Did want to mention under the Department of Labor, the hazard pay, which a number of employers have been doing or considering, especially as individuals have continued to work through the last few months. So we are seeing hazard pay as a policy that a number of companies will be either looking at considering or updating as they move forward. Thank you. Next slide, please. So at this time, we would like to take a second poll question, if we could, please. And the question is, what is your biggest concern with your organization reopening? The ability to adhere to new employment regulations, social distancing, etc., the possibility of employees contracting the virus, or administration of the FFCRA leave. We'll take a few moments to allow everyone the opportunity to vote.
So it looks as if 37% said the ability to adhere to new regulations, 52% said the possibility of employees contracting the virus, and 10% said administration of FFCRA leaves.
Thank you, Imani. Thank you, everyone, for taking time to answer that. And as expected, the possibility of employees contracting the virus is a top concern. Obviously, employers are taking steps to ensure that their safety of their employees is at the highest level that it can be. So next slide, please, as we can talk through next some additional safety policies that your handbook should have as well.
I believe we're frozen for a second, but just go ahead and proceed, and we'll try to get the next slide up for you.
So additional safety policies that you should have would include training on the new CDC guidelines and employer expectations. This is very important, especially with employees coming back into the workforce. They need to know a number of different things of what are the requirements for them. What does the employer have in place for social distancing, cleaning, location of supplies, etc. So that's very important, and we'll talk a little further here about that in a few minutes. Also looking at having a statement in your handbook about workers' compensation, and accident reporting process. What is the process for reporting accidents? Ensuring that that is in your handbook, and also providing employees with the contact of how and when they need to inform their employer. The next one is the bloodborne pathogen training, which is very key and ties into the infectious disease as well. These are policies that a number of employers will be putting into place, dealing with the recent pandemic as well. And just overall looking at your company's standard PPE policies. Things have changed, and now we need to look at the new normal of adding face masks, gloves, other safety supplies and safety equipment that maybe we didn't have to wear before. So it's important, again, to keep that in the handbook as well, and that helps with employees to also know what their expectation is from a safety standpoint. Returning to the workplace, a couple things and a couple questions that we've had from employers. What are best practices that employers can complete to help employees returning to the workplace? And I'm sure you've heard this again, where we're looking at keeping in mind that our employees are concerned about their safety during this time. And as the employer, you can set the tone and the message that you agree and understand with the importance of keeping employees and visitors and clients safe, and sharing with them what you as an organization have done. We've talked about also providing training to employees about the new company expectations for cleaning responsibilities, locations of safety supplies. A best practice that we are hearing a number of companies are starting is when employees are coming back into the workplace for the first time, reviewing with them the workplace postings that we mentioned in the previous links of here's the requirements, here's the regulations, here's what we as an organization want to review with you. It's important that managers and supervisors take time to review that with employees immediately upon them returning to the workforce. Being able to document that training is also very important. Next slide, please. and I'm sorry if I could back up one more slide again. Another thought is companies are looking at how can we do this training for our employees. It does not need to be an extensive hour-long training. It can be as simple as a quick meeting with them, providing the PDF of the expectations, and having everyone sign their name that they attended. This can also help from any potential claims coming down the road, and also just from an informational standpoint. It can be very simple. Next slide, please. One of the items that we want to ensure employers are keeping on their radar is, as you know, with anything new, or we've never had a pandemic of this magnitude, there is the potential for increases in employee lawsuits from this pandemic. And again, we're not sharing this to scare you, but sharing this to be sure you keep it on your radar. Data is showing continued expected increases nationwide in a number of different types of cases and claims. One of them relates to wage and hour claims. We're seeing class action suits for unpaid overtime hours, failure to pay for time worked, meals and break periods not enforced or taken, also the potential for layoff recalls, and what is the process to ensure that you have a standard review of how and when you're bringing employees back. What, again, that ties back to the employee handbook that we talked about before, having a specific guideline of what the layoff recall looks like, be consistent and objective, and document how and when you're bringing individuals back. It's in your best interest to be able to ensure that you can say, this is why we did what we did, and here's the documentation to prove that. Another item that we expect to see additional claims on are retaliation claims filed by employees stating that because of the leave that they took for the FFCRA, they felt there was a potential discrimination against their employer retaliating against them for taking that time. This is a lot of information, and we know that you have a lot of questions, so we will answer some questions at the end of this time. However, at this time, we'd like to turn it over to Darlene for her to talk through employee wellness.
Thank you, Renee, and thank you everyone for joining us today. That's definitely a lot of information to digest, and potentially a short time to do so if you're planning re-entry sooner rather than later into the workplace. So I wanted to shift focus ever so slightly to some other considerations that need to be made during this time. So if employees have been feeling the anxiety or stress from either being laid off or adjusting to the environment of working from home with all of the distractions that are present at home, don't think that by getting back to the job is going to alleviate all of their anxiety and stress. Yes, we are humans and we're creatures of habit, and we tend to fall into routines. But know that just re-entry into the workplace doesn't mean that it will be business as usual, as Renee kind of outlined with some of the new protocols. Most of the time, we are able to be rational. We're able to think, we're able to plan. But when there's stress or uncertainty, anxiety appears, and that causes irrational thoughts. And today, as most of you know, we have much uncertainty from an economic perspective, from a financial perspective, social perspective, and also from a health aspect, all resulting from COVID-19. Those are just the high-level uncertainties that are related to COVID-19, but know that there's other uncertainties that are creating stress within individuals' lives, in addition to anything that might be COVID-19 related. Yesterday, we had a guest speaker by the name of Guy Gage and our own Annie Yoder, who hosted a webinar relating to re-entry. And if you happen to miss that webinar, I encourage you to watch that on demand. through our Rea COVID-19 Resource Center because it does share some great content of what is needed from a leadership perspective. Leadership is always important for a business, but in today's situation, there is no greater time than this for leaders to step up. And it doesn't matter what size your business is or how many employees you have, leaders are needed to take away the uncertainty and to ease the anxiety that employees are feeling. And whether you're the business owner or whether you are a leader to your peer group, now is the time for you to step up. As a leader of your business, we wanted to share some guidelines to help reduce employee anxiety. So the first item that we have listed is communicate. Communicate, communicate. It can't be said enough. Provide updates regarding what is happening. Updates should be regular, they should be informative and short. The goal is to make employees feel connected, but not overwhelmed. Be open and honest. You don't need to paint a rosy picture that everything is fine because we know that it really isn't. Employees just want to be informed of what is happening and most importantly, how it's affecting them. Please be confident in your message, but don't be unrealistically positive and don't overpromise. The second thing you should do is to listen to your employees. Having the opportunity to be heard eliminates a great deal of uncertainty. Listening is very difficult for all of us. Whether we think we don't have time to listen or what someone is saying is not an important message, or whether we begin hearing what someone is saying and instantly start thinking of the response to them and miss part of their message. People don't necessarily want an immediate response. They want to know that their voice matters. And as is stated in the Rea way, listen intently. In addition to listening, ask questions. If someone says they're apprehensive about returning to work, ask them why, and make certain that you fully understand their explanation. Ideally, if you're able to share additional information or to do something that addresses their concerns, then they will know that you are truly listening. And if you can't do anything or you can't respond, just explain why. The communication and listening that we conduct will help us for a successful return to work and a successful return to a growing economy. In addition, offer tools to help. If you have an employee assistance program, also known as an EAP, that's a program that offers free and confidential assessments and short-term counseling or advising to employees. Those employees who are experiencing personal and or work-related problems. Make sure that you remind employees that such a program exists if you do offer that, and provide information on how to access those programs and features. If you don't have an EAP, consider implementing one. As you can, also communicate that in such unsettling times, it is not uncommon for individuals to talk through their situations with counselors and advisors. Do what you can to eliminate the stigma that talking with a counselor is a bad thing. In the business world, we have mentors showing individuals who are newer to the scene the ropes, guiding them to become a future leader and a mentor of their own. Working with a counselor is no different than being a mentor. It's just that they're a mentor for helping someone identify the issues causing them anxiety and finding ways to eliminate or overcome those anxieties. On the current slide, we list mindfulness as a tool. Mindfulness is a technique anyone can learn, and it's used to reduce anxiety. And actually, we have all probably used this in some capacity at some point. without knowing it or knowing that there was actually a term for it. If you think back to when you were a child, or even to your own children who may have been crying because something upset them, or because they got hurt, scraped their knee or elbow, the advice from a consoling adult is take a few deep breaths and calm down. Everything's going to be okay. Taking a few deep breaths is an act of mindfulness. Not only can you share the mindfulness technique, but you can practice it yourself. The mindfulness process can be summarized in the acronym RAIN. The R stands for recognize. Recognize what is happening. What is the emotion you are feeling, and name it. For example, I'm feeling overwhelmed. The A represents allowing. Allowing life to be just as it is. Allowing thoughts, emotions, feelings, just simply allowing them to be there. Know that they are existing. Allowing them doesn't mean that you like the situation that is causing what you are feeling. It is just acknowledging that the situation exists. We try to suppress or ignore difficult emotions. Doing so just causes inner struggle and tension, which causes our rational thinking to turn irrational. The I represents investigate. Investigate inner experience. Why do you feel the way you do? What do you need to resolve this emotion? Identify if there are steps you can take to alleviate this negative emotion. And the N stands for non-identification or non-attachment. This step turns your attention to the realization that you are not your irrational mind, nor are you your emotions. Your emotions do not define you. Our sense of who we are is not fused with any limiting emotions, sensations, or stories. The thoughts and emotions are part of the experience that we are having, but they are not who we are. And the RAIN model sometimes becomes RAINS, where the S indicates self-care. And self-care is not about having a massage or drinking champagne with your chocolate bonbons, unless, of course, those things help. That's fine. But rather, it's a conscious choice to take intentional actions that increase your mental, emotional, and physical health. If we could go to the next slide, please. So an area of consideration from where much anxiety and stress can stem is obviously the financial arena. This is true even without consideration of the effects of COVID-19. To give you some facts relating to this, only about half of Americans claim that they maintain some sort of emergency funds. So for the half who do not have emergency funds, or for individuals who have not been real good at budgeting, they might find additional financial burden that COVID-19 has created. There could be potential job loss, delayed unemployment benefits being received. They could have maxed out their credit cards. Credit cards typically have higher fees and rates. They might have used those funds for necessary living expenses, or they may have pulled funds from their retirement accounts to pay for those living expenses. They could have defaulted on loans. They could be in potential bill collection. Some could even potentially be facing eviction. So as you're bringing employees back, you may be thinking, I have enough concerns. And that's an absolutely true statement. You may be thinking, I can't be concerned about my employees' personal financial situations. because, well, that's personal. And as their employer, I shouldn't get involved in that part of their personal lives. Well, as an employer, trying to maintain employees while also maintaining financial stability is a real balancing act. So you might be looking for ways to cut expenses, deciding what your business can do without or could do less of. I can tell you that there's no simple answers. That's something that businesses and management and owners, really need to take a hard look at. But in regards to employee benefits, which may include a financial wellness program, we know that those aren't cheap. I can tell you that financially stressed employees are not cheap either. Of the employees that struggle financially, almost 80% of them indicate that financial stress provides distractions at work that have a negative effect on productivity and quality of work performed. Studies show that equates to about $2,000 per employee in lost productivity. Financial stress, like stress or anxiety from other factors, can take a physical toll on someone, which impacts employers in the form of higher paid time off for sick days and in higher costs for stress-related health costs. Employees who are worried about their finances are more likely to pursue other job opportunities. I know it's tight in today's market, but that potential still exists. They're looking for that proverbial greener grass on the other side of the fence, or they might be looking to move to a locale where expenses are not as large. If an employee feels their finances are on track and that their employer is invested in this, they tend to be more likely to stick around. So as you're considering the needs of your employees as reentry occurs, financial benefits, and I'm not talking simply a paycheck, although that is paramount, I'm speaking to wellness services and support. These are the most critical benefits you can offer your employees during this time, because financial anxiety affects not only the employee, but also you as the employer. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to provide a brief overview of some of the components of an employee financial wellness program. This can be as simple or as elaborate as you wish for it to be. Each financial wellness program would have some budgeting component to it. Individuals need to know what their expenses are and what resources they have to pay for those expenses. And even if individuals had a budget prior to COVID-19, now would be a good time to reevaluate and potentially reset that budget. If they found themselves in a financial crisis, they need to set some goals to get back on track. Once that happens, then they can start looking at other components, such as longer-term goal setting. And for that 50% that claim that they do not have an emergency or a rainy day fund, they need to work to establish one. A simple way to start this is by way of what's known as the Penny a Day program. This program is a 365-day, so an entire year program, where you save the number of pennies for whatever the number of days you are into the program. So for example, on day 1, you would save 1 penny. Day 2, you would save 2 pennies. Day 21, you would save 21 pennies, and so on for an entire year. So at the end of the year, you would have amassed $667.95 simply by saving pennies. Using those types of saving strategies when times are tight can provide great results in helping individuals on their way to a more stable financial situation. And before I turn it back over to Renee to provide some additional resource information, if we could launch the final poll question, please. So our final poll question is, do you think you will be adding a financial wellness program for your employees? And we have 4 options: yes, no, maybe, or no, we already have one.
So 3% answered yes, 30% answered no, 47% answered maybe, and 20% answered no, we already have one.
Okay, great. So, for those of you who are saying yes or maybe, if you're answering maybe, that was almost half of the group of attendees. Even if you're not in a position to offer right now, keep that in mind and consider offering that in the near future, because as a result of COVID-19, I think you're going to be seeing more employees who need that type of assistance. So with that, I would like to turn the presentation back over to Renee.
Thank you, Darlene. As we mentioned throughout the presentation today, we have a number of resources that we have cited for your reference. Also, we have a number of handouts that are also attached to this presentation for you to review. We also have listed here some additional resources for you as you move through and navigate these new waters that we're all experiencing. Of course, we have our Rea Associates site and our COVID-19 Resource Center that is updated daily, if not hourly at this point, with any updates regarding different policies and different things coming from the regulations as we move forward. We are also able to help you as you look through your policies and procedures. Should you need assistance with your handbook, please reach out to us. We've also cited the Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor Husted site for their daily briefings at 2 p.m. We've cited the CDC location here and the Ohio Department of Health. We've also listed here the U.S. Department of Labor, which will talk through the different upcoming policies related to pay, etc. We've also cited here the OSHA site as well. Next slide, please. And also another additional reference point for you is the local your Ohio BWC or Bureau's Worker of Compensation site, and that is www.bwc.ohio.gov. There are a lot of free resources for employers on there to assist with questions and items for your workplace. With that, we would like to turn it over and answer some of the questions that the audience has brought up.
Thanks, Renee. Yes, if you guys have any more questions that you would like to ask, please submit those now. And the first question that we have here is, the governor has said mandate masks for all employees. These violate our safety glass policy as they make them fog up. I believe that would qualify us to not wear or not have to wear them, but we recommend if and when they can. So, or can you recommend? I'm assuming that's asking.
Yes, thank you for that question. That's actually, as a reference, please refer back to the BWC website, but there is the criteria or the exception for if there is a safety issue in not wearing the mask. So your comment of making it available, should they choose to wear it, is acceptable. I would reference that you or request that you make a document note that the reason you're not is possibly because of the safety issue with the safety glasses fogging up.
If I could just add something to that, Renee, I know that there's been some discussion about the mask. So depending on what type of mask the individuals are wearing, I think that if they're N95s, that they're less likely to fog up if you're wearing glasses or safety glasses. So if you haven't tried those, and I know the N95s are hard to actually get at this point, but that might be a consideration also, is look at what type of masks are being offered.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
The next question we have here is, what if an employee is high risk but wants their conditions to stay confidential? Does the employee need to come back to work if the employer wants them to?
That's a very good question. So the confidentiality piece of that is very important. As long there's twofold there. So if the employee is able to show that they are high risk and unable to return to work and have documentation from a doctor to support that, that could be a criteria for them to have the paid leave. But they would need to have something to support that.
Great. Next question here is, can offices open in schools if they are closed per the governor, 20 to 30 people in the school office?
You know, that is something I do not have the answer to. I know that the governor is planning to, in his discussion today, from what I'm hearing, add more detail around office work in those entities. So I do not have an answer to that at this point.
Next question we have here is, do we know if a cubicle in the office environment is considered an enclosed workspace where a face covering is not required?
That is another good question. I would refer back to the postings that we have from the Department of Health. There is a section on their website that you can go into to ask specific questions about office layouts or cubicles. So I would recommend that you go into that and ask them directly for that guidance.
Thanks, Renee. And then we're going to have the final question, and then I'll give you ladies an opportunity to give your final thoughts, and we'll conclude a few minutes early today. So the last question is your impression that businesses with office workers who can work from home are encouraged to do so through the month of May?
That is a good question, and yes, that's actually the directive and the request, from the governor as a best practice. If you have workers that are working remotely now, those that are continued to be able to do so, they recommend doing so because that can also help with the, curbing of exposure, and a great practice to continue if they can. And we're seeing a lot of companies that are planning to do that and continue that. Especially moving forward here for the next couple months.
Great. I'm going to give both of you an opportunity to give some closing thoughts, and then we'll conclude today.
Thank you, Imani. Again, we thank everybody for taking time to attend today's session. We understand there could still be some questions that come up. Please feel free and reach out to us with any of those questions. As an HR professional myself, I know and understand the challenges that we've all been experiencing over the past few months. And it's exciting also to hear of companies that are, embracing people coming back into work and making it a safe workplace. So as we move forward, Rea Associates continues to help, and we want to be a resource for you. I'll turn it over to Darlene.
Thank you, Renee. And I'll just reiterate Renee's comments there. The governor has given guidelines as far as when people can return to work, and just know that those are guidelines. Just because he stated these are when certain businesses can begin re-entry and reopening their doors. If you're not prepared from a safety perspective, consider that, because safety is going to be paramount. I'm sure that we're going to see some changes in the number of reported cases as we start opening businesses back up. So, safety is paramount here. if you need additional resources, as Renee mentioned, we are updating our resource page every day and even hourly as new information comes to light. So be sure to check that. Know that we're available as a resource. And good luck to everybody. We need to get the economy going again, but let's do it safely. So thank you.
Thank you, Darlene and Renee, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on what is life after coronavirus, next steps for Restart Ohio and workplace safety compliance. We hope the team was able to provide you with some valuable insight that will help you make sense of the current COVID-19 crisis. If you sign up today and realize that you have additional questions, you're always welcome to reach out to Renee and Darlene directly. You can also reach any of our REA team members by clicking on the People section of the firm's website at www.reacpa.com. That's REA. Don't forget to watch your inbox for an evaluation survey, access to the recording of today's webinar, and more. And thank you all. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day.